One of my favorite ways to fish in the winter is with a bomber deep flat A. It's a tight wiggling, thin crankbait that dives to 6 to 7 feet on 10-pound line. It's got a really great, like I said, a tight wiggle for those cold water bass. It really has the right action. It comes through riprap good and other rocks. And that's what I like to do when I'm fishing is I'll get on real, 45 to or steeper banks, especially those on channel swings or points that come out near a channel, and just parallel it really tight. Today we're fishing out on the main lake at Pickwick, and you got a lot of current coming down the lake, and we're fishing on a bank where the current is hitting and pushing out. So these fish are sitting in behind the rocks and letting the current bring the bait to them. They can sit, behind these big boulders and jagged rocks on the bottom and be out of the current, but they're close to it. So I like to keep my boat as tight as I can to the rocks and just parallel it and slowly grind all the way back out. One thing with the deep flat A, with it being thin like it is, it doesn't have near the buoyancy that a fat crankbait will. So that when you hit a rock and hesitate, that crankbait's is really close to a neutral buoyancy. So it's going to sit there and kind of suspend, not float up real fast out of the way, and that's what you want in the cold water. You don't want a bait that's when you hesitate, it's going to pop up, like almost like a bobber. You want that hesitation and suspending. I'm cranking this on a Dobbins 7-foot medium glass rod. It's a 705 fast action glass with the Lew's BB1 cranking reel. It's a 5-to-1 gear ratio with 10-pound vicious copolymer line. It's a real low stretch line, so you're feeling all the vibration of the bait. If it gets when it gets cold, the copolymer has a little more resistance to the cold, and so I like to use the cranking in cold water. I like to use the copolymer. There he is. All right, come off. You didn't get it good. It's about a 3-pounder, huh? There he is. All right. That's a deep flat A fish. You can tell he wanted that thing too. You're always looking at clues on when you're fishing to try to let that lead you to the next fish. One thing to always look at this time of year is in the crushers in the back of the bass's throats. And this is the time of year that you'll see a lot of times when they're red, that means they're feeding on crawls, and that it can kind of tell you, any bait changes you need to make. But when those crushers in the back are raw, then that they're feeding heavily on crawls. All right. Another deep flat A fish. that tight wiggle in this cold water. The water temperature is 50 degrees, and that tight wiggle, it's hard for them to stand it. Fat little fish. It does. There he is. Might be a better one right there. Maybe a white bass. No, it's a largemouth. Little guy, barely hooked. Oops. A lot of times when they have one hook in them like that, the best thing you can do is swing them, because when you sit there and try to get down and belly land them, you give them more time. But when that have that single hook, by keeping tension on them, a lot of times you are able to land those fish. He did. He thought he was a big one to start out. Color-wise, when I'm on these baits, the one I'm throwing today is one that it's a color that I like a lot. It's called sun perch. It's a crankbait. It's a color that's going to be new for this coming year. Kind of a mixture of a brown back and green and pink. That is a really great color in this cold water. For some reason, it seems like that pink just kind of, a lot of times in the winter, you got kind of a opaque look to the water, kind of a whitish look, and that pink just kind of glows in that. Other colors that I throw a lot are fire tiger, and I throw the red crawl a lot. That's a great color this time of year. Also the chartreuse blackback with the orange belly. That's a really good color, especially when you've got some dingy water, or you've had some of the winter rains that have put some dirty, have dirtied up the water and put some color into it. But that red crawl color is also really good this time of year, especially like I said earlier when we caught that one that had the tonsils that had the crushers that were red. When they're keying on crawls, that red crawl was really tough to beat. There he is. Another pretty fish. Starting to bleed a little bit. Rough on him. I don't know what he disliked the most, the concussion or the blood coming out. That's a better one. All right, come off. Quick release. Golly. That one kind of caught me. Oh yeah. Look at that big girl. That's a deep flat-A fish right there. That's a pretty fish. Bright colors. Pretty fish. That fish hit real soft. I just bumped into the rock and it just kind of loaded. It wasn't a hard bite. That's the way a lot of the bites are in the winter. Pretty fish. All right. Thank you, girl. Hey, I'm Bassmaster Pro Jimmy Mason, and today I wanted to show you some of my favorite colors in the deep flat A for fishing in the winter. You know, we've been out here today on Pickwick and catching some really nice ones fishing the deep flat A. Um, Color-wise, this time of year I throw a lot of dark ones. I don't throw a lot of shad colors. I throw a lot of brights. You know, chartreuse root beer is a color that I throw a lot this time of year. Um, when it gets colder, you know, gets in those mid 40s and the water gets a good stain to it, then I'm gonna throw the red crawl a lot because you know this time of year there's a lot of fish feeding on crawls, and that red crawl is hard to beat. You know when it's blackback chartreuse is hard to beat any time down here in that cold water, especially as it starts warming up and into the pre-spawn. When you get those spring rains and get some stain to it, a little bit of mud, the black and chartreuse is tough to beat. Uh, Fire tiger is always a standard. You know, clear water, clear cold water, dirty water, fire tiger can be hard to beat. Uh, you know, it's one of those baits. If I'm in doubt on what color to throw, the fire tiger is it. Another one of my favorites is the sun perch, which is similar to a fire tiger. It's got a little pink to it without the black bars. It's kind of a brownish back with the chartreuse and pink to it. That color to me is probably my number one cold water crankbait color. It's hard to anytime the water's below 60 or 55 to 60, then and I'm throwing it, I'll probably have one of these tied on with in addition to any other color. Uh, Finally, the brownback chartreuse. For me, that's better early in the winter. You know, as the water temperature's falling through the 50s for whatever reason, that color right there does really well. But you know, you can see from looking at this, I'm a deep flat A fanatic, and uh, you know they're just a great cold water crankbait. I do have a few shad colors that I throw early in the winter. You know, when the fish are still kind of keying on shad coming out of the fall feeding period. You know, that's then I will throw a shad some, but as it gets on into that winter period, it's more the chartreuses and the reds. So give it a try this winter. You know, it's a deadly cold water crankbait.